What could be more Orwellian than CNN's Jake Tapper quoting Orwell to argue that the Democrat Party doesn't want you to believe your lying eyes and ears about Biden's cognitive decline, no less. Watch.
In an attempt to reassure voters about his fitness for office, Biden campaign chair Jen O'Malley Dillon holding a call with party leaders earlier today, telling them this too shall pass. There is a pattern, discernible pattern of Democratic officials seemingly trying to convince you, the public, to not believe what you saw and what you heard with your eyes and with your ears on Thursday night. Democratic officials have tried to spin this in many ways. They said President Biden just had a cold. They said it was just one off night, akin to when President Obama in 2012 was rusty and seemed a little huffy. But behind the scenes, make no mistake, most Democratic officials witnessed the same shocking spectacle that you did.
But don't get too excited just yet. While Tapper is obviously picking a side in the left's internal civil war over whether or not to keep Biden for November, it should not be misconstrued as him going rogue and finally becoming some free-thinking truth teller. He still hates our guts, guys. He'd still happily be gaslighting us about Biden's mental acumen if he thought that was more beneficial to his party. It's just like with COVID and the medical establishment finally throwing us a few bones about what they lied to us about for years. They're still dictating what you're allowed to believe and when. So even when it's truthful reporting, the problem is that it's the who, what, when, where, and why of finally being told the truth, and that it's still being carefully dictated for ulterior motives that are not for our best interest. There was a similar dynamic at play with the media's coverage of Jeffrey Epstein. When it wasn't in their interest to report on his crimes, well, they didn't. When it became politically expedient to do so, as in they thought they could leverage it in the Me Too era against President Trump, then they started to pretend to care. But once it became obvious that President Trump was one of the very few in elite circles to actually go against Epstein long before it was fashionable to do so, then they dropped the story again and Epstein died mysteriously, and so they wouldn't have to talk about his strong ties to Bill Clinton, Prince Andrew, most of Hollywood, the fashion industry, and corporate America, essentially the Democrat donor class. Joining us now to discuss the new Epstein document dump this week is Brianna Morello, the host of the Brianna Morello Show. You may know her as the corporate media escapee who left Fox over the company caving to the COVID-19 vaccine mandate. Brianna, thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Great. So where are these transcripts on Epstein coming from in the first place with this document dump?
Yeah, well, thankfully, Florida Republicans passed legislation and Governor Ron DeSantis signed it into law, giving us access to these grand jury transcripts so we could kind of get some understanding as to why federal prosecutors decided to only give Epstein a year and a half in prison. And well, it was very lenient because he was in jail, actually. And then he was kind of going around to his office and coming back. And, you know, it was very flexible and very cushy, the conditions that he had in this plea agreement. Now, he did have to become a registered sex offender, but again, very, very cushy when you see exactly what prosecutors knew, which in this transcript, about 176 pages long. You realize they had a much bigger case at their fingertips, and they just decided not to go about prosecuting him and holding him up to the full extent of the law like they always claim that they do. Now, that was Alex Acosta. Many of you guys are familiar with him. He's the prosecutor. He was the prosecutor here in Florida, the federal prosecutor. But he also worked in the Trump administration and was forced to resign as the Secretary of Labor because of all of this. So it's disturbing when you go through the details of what's in these transcripts.
It really is, and you've done a lot. You've done the hard work here. I mean, you've been scouring through the transcripts, through the documents. I was wondering if you could tell us what some of your big takeaways are, some of the new developments that you are reading in these transcripts.
Yeah, these transcripts are very graphic. And so just to point your audience, I'm going to post this on my Substack so you could read it yourself. I'm not going to give you all the details to it because it is very, very graphic, but I will give you the details overview of it pretty much. Ultimately, these prosecutors knew because they heard firsthand accounts of a young woman who details the fact that just one day before her 18th birthday, what she claims Epstein knew about, he actually raped her. And that's exactly what she details in it. She details exactly how it happened, exactly how it took place, how prior to this he was talking to her about her school because she was in high school and asked her questions about her career and what kind of ambition she had in her future before he actually raped her the day before her birthday. Now, they also talk about gifts being given to her for her birthday.